Hello. Today I am going to dive into chapters 8 and 9. Chapter 8 being all about managing human resources and labor relations. Chapter 9 being all about motivating your employees. I feel like these two chapters go very well together, hand in hand, so I like to pair them together. So I'm going to start with chapter 8, and it's again all about human resource management, which is just the process of hiring, developing, motivating, and evaluating employees to achieve organizational goals. So keyword in there, motivating too. And that's a big part of human resource management. And it's also another reason why I think that these two chapters go great together. So the human resource management process contains different sequenced activities, if you will. So we've got our job analysis and design, we've got our human resource planning and forecasting, and we've got our employee recruitment, we've got our employee selection, training, development, performance planning and evaluation, and compensation and benefits, which is one of the things that us employees are always most interested in because we always are in the need and want to get paid, right? And so in this chapter, we're going to kind of dig into the different elements of human resource management and what kind of goes with that. All right. So in chapter 8, it starts talking about the human resource management process and how are these human resource needs determined. Okay. So again, I already mentioned that what human resource management is, but when it comes to human resource management, the process, again, the activities that begins with your job analysis and human resource planning progresses into that employee recruitment and selection, then focuses on employee training, performance appraisal, and compensation, and then ends with the employees that leave the organization. So creating a strategy for meeting human resource needs is called human resource planning. And that begins with job analysis. So our job analysis is a process for studying a job to determine its tasks and duties for setting pay, determining employee job performance, specifying hiring requirements, and designing different training programs. So information from job analysis is used to prepare a job description, which, kind of details what the job will entail, if you will, which lists information in the task responsibilities of a specific job. So a job specification describes the skills, knowledge, and abilities a person needs to actually fulfill the job described in the job description. So sometimes I know a lot of my students will get that job specification and job description confused. So just one more time to hone it in. Job description is really just describing the actual job, all right? It lists the tasks and responsibilities of the particular job. The job specification is describing more of the skills, knowledge, and abilities a person actually needs to do the job, all right? So that's the biggest difference between the two. So by examining the human resource demand forecast and the internal supply forecast, human resource professionals can really determine if the company faces, personnel surplus or shortage. So that just means like, do we have too many employees or do we not have enough? Do we need more in this area? Do we need less in this area, etc.? All right. So your book talks about how organizations actually recruit applicants, all right? So when a job vacancy or a job opening occurs, most firms begin by trying to fill that job from within the ranks of its own employees, known as the internal labor market, if you will. And I always tell people to go for those companies that really want to recruit and promote within. Those are awesome. Those companies that want employees that want to grow within their own are great, all right? So if a suitable internal candidate is not available, the firm begins an external search, and then firms use local media to recruit, kind of the non-technical, unskilled, non-supervisory workers. To locate highly trained recruits, employees use college recruiters, executive search firms, job fairs, company websites to really promote job openings. So think of those, Indeed.com and stuff like that. So during this search process, firms present an accurate and positive image of the company to those being recruited, called recruitment branding. Okay. So, how firms actually select those qualified applicants might be a question on your mind. So there is a selection process typically, and it really helps identify the candidates in the applicant pool, so the people that have applied for the job who possess the best qualifications for the open position. So typically, an applicant makes it past the initial screening. He or she may be asked to take an aptitude test or a personality or skills test, all right, to kind of see where they are. And then the next step is in the selection interview, which is typically more in-depth discussion of the applicant's work experience, skills, abilities, education, career interests, etc. And I just want you to know that not all jobs require you to take those personalities or skills tests or whatever, but it is definitely not uncommon. So you could, depending on the job that you're actually applying for, but it's not for every position. But if the applicant passes the selection interview, most firms then conduct background checks, talk with their references, any kind of, if the job requires any physical labor, maybe a physical exam. Some jobs require drug testing. So those all might be part of the selection process, again, depending on the job. All right. They all vary. So then it talks about different types of training and development that organizations actually offer their employees. And so training and development programs are designed to increase employees' knowledge, skills, and abilities to foster job performance improvements. So formal training, usually like in the classroom, in nature, or off the job, takes place shortly after being hired. And then development programs prepare employees to assume positions of increasing authority and responsibility. So job rotation, executive education programs, mentoring, special project assignments, these are all examples of employee development programs. And so when it comes to performance appraisals, your book talks about how they are actually used to evaluate employee performance. And so a performance appraisal really compares an employee's actual performance with the expected performance. So in previous chapters, I've mentioned, businesses or companies having these set standards, and then when they go to evaluate their employees, they're evaluating each one to see if they have met those standards. Have they exceeded them? Have they, are they underperforming? Whatever that looks like. So performance appraisals serve several purposes, but are typically used to determine an employee's compensation, training needs, and advanced opportunities. Not every single evaluation results in a raise, but a lot of them do, or at least have that opportunity attached with them. But not every company does that. So it talks about the different types of compensations and methods of paying workers. So it mentions the direct pay, which is an hourly wage or monthly salary paid to an employee. So in addition to the base wage or salary, direct pay may include bonuses and profit shares. So direct pay is the one that we are all probably most familiar with, all right? Indirect pay consists of various benefits and services. So some benefits are required by law: unemployment compensation, workers' compensation, Social Security. We are all by law all organizations have to provide that. But many employers also offer benefits not required by law. So these include paid vacations, holidays, pensions, health, and other types of insurance, so dental. It could be any type of insurance like that, life insurance. Employee wellness programs, that's a big one. College tuition reimbursement, which is great. Not a lot of companies do not offer that, but a lot do as well, and that's an awesome benefit. So benefits definitely vary based on the company, and there's some companies that have some amazing ones. In the chapters 8 and 9 assignment, we will be digging into those. So then it talks about labor unions, all right? So it kind of pivots a little bit and starts digging into a little bit more of labor unions, and what is a labor union? How is it organized? what is collective bargaining? What are some of those key negotiation issues? So I'm going to brief through some of this real quick. So a labor union is an organization that represents workers in dealing with management over disputes involving wages, hours, and working conditions. And then a company is unionized through an organized drive that begins either side with a small group of existing employees or outside with an established union that targets that actual employer. So when the union gets signed authorization cards from 30% of the firm's employees, the National Labor Relations Board, and I think your book actually calls it the NLRB, conducts a union certification election. So a majority vote is needed to certify the union as an exclusive bargaining agent. So the union and the employer then begin collective bargaining and have 1 year in which to actually reach an agreement. So collective bargaining is the process of negotiating, administering, and interpreting labor agreements. So both union and management negotiators prepare a bargaining proposal, and the two sides meet and exchange demands and ideas. So bargaining consists of compromising, as you are probably familiar with that term, and concessions that lead to a tentative agreement. So top management then approves or disapproves the agreement for the management team. Union members vote to either approve or reject the contract. And the key issues included in the union contract are typically wage increases, fringe benefits, and job security. Some companies don't like to hire union workers because of all the rules and regulations that go with that. So it talks about how grievances between management and labor are resolved, and what different types of tactics are actually used to force a contract settlement. So in most labor agreements, the grievance procedure consists of 3 or 4 steps. In the first step, the employee typically files that grievance. Then this is an oral or written presentation to the supervisor and may involve a union steward or worker as a representative of that grievance. And then the next steps really involve meetings of the employee and one more union official and that appropriate supervisor and one more management or official, if you will. So if the grievance is not resolved at step 3, either party, union or management, can request that an arbitrator or a neutral third party hear and decide the grievance. So the arbitrator reviews the grievance at a hearing and then makes that decision, which is presented in a document called the actual award. So there's kind of a lot of steps that go into that. So when a union contract expires and a new agreement has not been reached, the union may impose economic pressure on the firm. And so these tactics may take the form of strikes, boycotts, picketing, corporate campaigns, etc. And so similarly, the employers may implement lockouts. So where like the employees can't come in, they might hire replacements or move production to another facility to place pressure on a union to accept a new contract. So toward the end of the chapter, it talks about the key laws and federal agencies affecting human resource management and their labor relations. So there's several federal laws that actually affect human resource management. And federal law prohibits discrimination based on age, race, gender, color, national origin, religion, or disability. And so your book goes in to talk about the American Disabilities Act, or the ADA, and that bans discrimination against disabled workers and requires employers to change the work environment to accommodate the disabled. So if you've ever heard of FMLA, which is the Family and Medical Leave Act, which is also another benefit that a lot of companies offer, they require employers, with certain exceptions, to provide employees up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave a year. And this leave can be for like birth or someone giving birth or adoption of a child, or anything due to like a serious illness or of a serious illness of a family member. So different federal agencies that actually deal with human resource administration are the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, if you've heard of OSHA. And then the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. Also, the wage and hour division of the Department of Labor. So the EEOC and the OFCCP are primary agencies for the enforcement of employment discrimination law, and OSHA enforces the safety regulations. So the wage and hour division enforces the minimum wage and related laws. So we've heard a lot about minimum wage prices increases in the last several years, and that's kind of who deals with that. And many companies employ affirmative action and safety officers to ensure compliance with anti-discrimination and workplace safety laws. So your book talks about the Wagner and Taft-Hartley Acts that kind of govern the union management relationship, in part through the functions performed by the National Labor Relations Board. So this law gives workers the right to form and join labor unions and obligates the employer to deal with the union fairly. And so the very end of the chapter, like most chapters in this textbook, it talks about the different trends that are affecting human resource management and labor relations. And it just kind of talks about how human resource managers really recognize that diverse workforce creates an environment that really nurtures and creative decision making, also effective problem solving, and more agility in adapting to change and a stronger competitive advantage. So these firms are really becoming committed to recruiting and hiring a diverse workforce, which we all like to see. And really, to maximize efficiency, many firms are outsourcing HR functions and using technology to reduce costs and improve efficiency. So firms are really striving to hire employees who possess qualities that match those of their corporate culture. So a few things to kind of just wrap up Chapter 8. Chapter 9 is a great piggyback on Chapter 8 because it's all about motivating employees, which again, I think goes hand in hand with human resource management, because employees are really interested in understanding the process of motivation, or I said employers, what motivates individuals and how an organization can actually create a workplace that allows people to perform at the best or to the best of their abilities, right? So all employers should really be interested and understand what motivates their employees, because that's how they're going to get the most that actually want to stay with the company. So your book kind of talks about how many studies of humans, if you will, have contributed to the current understanding of job performance. So high productivity and job satisfaction. So these early studies have really enabled contemporary managers to better understand their workers' efforts and expectations, their workers' perceptions of fairness, and then just for other sources of motivation. And so we will, this chapter 9 really kind of details several of these motivational studies, all right? So it starts by talking about what motivation is. And again, it kind of, it might depend on, where you're reading it, but it's really just a set of forces that prompts a person to release energy in a certain direction. So a motivation is essentially a need and want satisfying process. A need is defined as the gap between what is and what is required. Okay, so think about needs. We're all kind of familiar with that. Then similarly, a want is the gap between what is and what is desired. So a need, what is required. A want, what is desired. And sometimes we get our needs and wants intertwined, entangled, if you will. So in your book, it talks about different motivational theories that I'm going to kind of briefly dive into. And there's several different ones. And I think I find this interesting, and I hope you do too, because it's just kind of different takes on motivation and what different people feel like motivate, how people are motivated. So it first talks about the basic principles of Frederick Taylor's concept of scientific management. So it mentions that scientific management is based on the belief that employees are all motivated by economic incentives and that there is only one best way to perform any job. So the 4 basic principles of the scientific management developed by Taylor are: develop a scientific approach for each element of a person's job, scientifically select, train, teach, and develop workers, encourage cooperation between workers and managers so that each job can be accomplished in a standard, scientifically determined way, and then divide work and responsibility between management and workers according to who is better suited for each task. All right. So that kind of is a quick synopsis of Frederick Taylor's concept of scientific management. And then it goes into Elton Mayo's Hawthorne studies. You may or may not be familiar. It's a fairly popular one. And what it reveals about worker motivation. And so the pride that came from special attention motivates workers to really increase productivity. So supervisors who really allow employees to have some control over their situation appear to further increase the workers' motivation. The Hawthorne effect suggests that employees will perform better when they feel singled out for special attention or feel that management is concerned about employee welfare. Then it gets into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, another pretty well-known one, and how these needs really relate to motivation. So Maslow believed that each individual has a hierarchy of needs consisting of physiological, safety, social esteem, and self-actualization needs. And in your book, there's a little pyramid that kind of just gives you a visual. But managers who accept Maslow's ideas attempt to increase employee motivation by modifying organization and managerial practices to increase the likelihood that employees will meet all levels of needs. So Maslow's theory has also helped managers really understand that it's hard to motivate people by appealing to already satisfying needs, or satisfied needs, if you will. So then they dig into McGregor's theories X and Y, and it also talks about theory Z, all right? And so, and how these are used to explain work motivation. So Douglas McGregor influenced the study of motivation with his formulation of 2 contrasting sets of assumptions about human nature. Theory X and Theory Y. So Theory X says people don't like to work and will avoid it if they can. Because people don't like to work, they must be controlled, directed, or threatened to get them to make any kind of effort. All right. Theory Y says that people want to be self-directed and will try to accomplish goals that they believe in. So workers can be motivated with positive incentives. And so then McGregor personally believed that Theory Y assumptions really describe most employees, and that managers seeking to motivate subordinates should really develop management practices based on those assumptions. So then the Theory Z concept came into play, and that kind of combines the U.S. and Japanese business practices. Theory Z really emphasizes long-term employment, slow career development, and group decision-making. And the long-term decline of the Japanese economy has really resulted in most U.S. firms moving away from the Japanese management practices altogether. So then it kind of jumps into what are the basic components of Herzberg's motivator hygiene theory concept, if you will. So there's a guy named Frederick Herzberg, and his studies indicated that certain job factors are consistently related to employee job satisfaction, whereas others can create job dissatisfaction. So according to Herzberg, motivating factors, also called satisfiers, are primarily intrinsic job elements that lead to satisfaction, such as achievement, recognition, the nature of work itself, responsibility, advancement, growth, etc. Okay, so what Herzberg termed hygiene factors, also called dissatisfiers, are extrinsic elements of the work environment, such as company policy, relationships with supervisors, working conditions, relationships with peers and subordinates, salary and benefits, which is a huge extrinsic motivator, and job security. Okay, so just think intrinsic motivators, they come more within, extrinsic motivators come externally. All right, so these are different factors that can result in job dissatisfaction if not well managed. So one of the most interesting results from Herzberg's studies was that the implication that the opposite of satisfaction is not dissatisfaction, okay? Herzberg believed that the proper management of hygiene factors could prevent employee dissatisfaction, but these factors could not serve as a source of satisfaction or motivation. So that one's pretty interesting. I think so anyways. And then it talks about the, 4 contemporary theories on employee motivation that offer insights into improving employee performance. So according to the expectancy theory, the probability of an individual acting in a particular way really depends on the strength of that individual's belief that the act will have a particular outcome on whether the individual values that outcome. So, the expectancy theory is that individual acts on what they perceive or what they're expecting. And if they expect the outcome to be great, they're going to act in that way. Or if they expect the outcome not to be great, they might not. All right. So the equity theory is based on the individual's perceptions about how fairly they are treated compared with their coworkers. All right. So, that one kind of is very self-explanatory as it focuses on equity within the workplace. Then we have the goal setting theory, and that states that employees are highly motivated to perform when specific goals are established, and feedback on progress is offered, which I think is pretty valid today still. I know when I have goals set and I can accomplish them and get some good feedback, that's motivational for me. Then we have the reinforcement theory that states that behavior is a function of consequences. So that's people do things because they know other things will follow. So I don't think that one is great. I always have viewed reinforcement theory as a little bit more negative, but after you dig into the chapter, you can let me know what you think. And then it kind of goes into how managers redesign existing jobs to really increase employee motivation and performance. So it talks about the horizontal expansion of a job by increasing the number and variety of tasks that a person can perform is called job enlargement. So again, expanding the jobs of that particular person or jobs, tasks, responsibilities, etc. And increasing task diversity can really enhance job satisfaction, particularly when the job is mundane and repetitive in nature. So it kind of changes things up a little bit. Job enrichment is the vertical expansion of an employee's job to provide the employee with more autonomy, responsibility, and decision-making authority. So other popular motivational tools include work scheduling options, employee recognition programs, empowerment, and, variable pay programs, which some of you may be familiar with because your companies may do that. Your current companies that you work for may do that. And so lastly, toward the end of the chapter, at the end of the chapter, it talks about different initiatives that organizations are really using today to motivate and retain employees. So, and there's several key tactics to really motivate and retain workers. So when you're reading this chapter, think about yourself. Like, what motivates you? Do you think these, as you're reading through, do you think they would apply to you or not? But first, it talks about how companies are really investing more in employee education and training, which is true. And it makes employees more productive and confident in their jobs. It also shows employees that their company is willing to invest in them, which I always think is great motivation. And then second, managers really are giving employees the opportunity to participate in the ownership of the company, which can really strongly increase employee commitment. So employers are really providing more work-life benefits to employees, and a small but growing percentage of companies are offering employees paid sabbaticals in addition to regular vacation and sick time. I know the company that my husband works for offers paid sabbatical once you've worked there a certain amount of years. So as the composition of the workforce changes, it is really becoming increasingly important for companies to understand how to manage knowledge workers. One of the method of doing this is really establishing communities of practice that really enable workers to share expertise across the organization. And then, lastly, I want to end on how I just think like businesses today, or their environment, really need to pay attention to, managing absence rates and employee, turnover. Okay. And so if you are if you are a manager and you are constantly getting, employee turnover, maybe it's time to actually evaluate why that is. All right. And so kind of taking a time to pause, why are we constantly having employee turnover? And so maybe that's something that you need to think about as managers, and this, something that maybe you can reevaluate, and always get feedback for your employees is a great way to do that as well. All right, that's a wrap on chapter 9. I hope you enjoy both chapters 8 and 9, and I will be chatting with everyone soon.